Great. So, good morning, everybody. Thank you for sticking around for Friday. Not everybody does. Halls are a little quieter outside. Breakfast was a little easier to get. But we still have plenty of great content for you guys here on our third day of Dreamforce. I think one of our session is one of those examples. Today, we're here in the manufacturing vertical sessions. So this is the first year where we've actually been able to carve out a specific track just for manufacturing. So for those of you in the manufacturing vertical, look for more of this next year, and we'd love to get your feedback on the surveys. Make sure you tell us what more we could be doing next year for you to make this even a more compelling event. So today's session is called The World is Flat, Managing Your Manufacturing Business Across Multiple Sites. My name is Kevin Sherman. I am a Customer Success Manager with Salesforce.com. I've been with Salesforce for a little over 5 years, and this is my 5th Dreamforce, and I don't know how it can get any bigger next year, but it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and I think this year was as big as I ever thought it would get. But hopefully you'll be back next year again, too, and we'll all find out if we can keep growing this. The style of today's presentation is going to be a panel discussion, and how I've set it up is we'll have some questions that I'm going to ask the gentlemen that are sitting up on stage with me on the panel, and then we're going to have time for Q&A as well. So certainly want to hear your questions, want you to have an opportunity to interact with these guys, but I'm going to ask you to hold those questions until we get to that section of the agenda. All righty. So this is our safe harbor statement. I assumed you guys already passed the test on this. There was a quiz as you walked in. If you skipped that or missed it, see me after class. We'll get you another copy of that exam. Or you can just go to our website and read it anytime you want. So whether your company is a large international organization or a small manufacturer, you have certain processes that you need to go through when you roll out Salesforce on a global basis. It's actually our model, the architecture of having all this data in the cloud and the application in the cloud is great for these types of distributed environments where you have maybe research and development in one country and sales in another, and other groups, product direction in another area, and corporate entities in another area. Our application really lends very well towards that. The service and its ability to be delivered through the web really lets you take advantage of all the different regions that you're operating in to bring all of those groups together to achieve efficiencies. So some of the takeaways I hope you get from this session is best practices and lessons learned from the guys that are up here and their experiences and their global deployments, and anything that I can add in terms of the dozens of CRM implementations I've worked on with international companies and how we've deployed it and the success that I've seen over the last 5 years with the customers I've engaged with. One of those big value propositions for this is breaking down the silos. So I hope we're going to touch on some interesting things, or things that are interesting to you, like global account team management, tackling the questions around administration of the application. Should it be centralized? Should it be decentralized? Where should the folks that are going to build these applications for you and your global teams sit, and how do they interact with each other? How to drive efficiencies. So what was the value? Where's the rubber really meeting the road? What have I been able to do better now than I was able to do before? And some tips and tricks, not only on the sales side of this, but on the service side of it, and on the custom cloud, touching all 3 of the main clouds that Salesforce has been talking about for the last few days. So generally, when you talk about a global deployment and what drives that and why you would want a global deployment of Salesforce, what are the value you're going to get as an organization out of that? You know, the thing that I keep hearing top and foremost among all the folks I've talked to along this line is visibility across geos, that most companies operate in silos, that they have their data in each individual geography, or for you it might be a territory or a region, depending on your nomenclature for that in your organization. They tend to operate independently, and their probably doing very well doing that, but there are some sacrifices that get made at the corporate level when you have all these data silos. And usually one of the first things that you're looking for when you choose to deploy our solution globally is getting that visibility across all the geos, whether it be for a revenue forecasting or manufacturing or product forecasting perspective. That's usually one of the first things that you're hoping to achieve in these implementations. Talking about acting global, but being able to think locally. So your customer's not really caring whether or not really needing to know whether or not they're dealing with somebody locally or across the other side of the world. That for them, the face of the customer, the face of your company is whoever they're dealing with, irregardless of where they are around the world, yet you're able to understand their needs as they differ from region to region and from geo to geo. That's typically why those silos came about in the first place, is because different places around the world do business differently. And you want that to be transparent to your customers. You want them to get the same experience regardless of what channel they reach you through and which office they might be contacting or where the customer is. And they might be talking amongst themselves and working with each other, but working with you through different channels and different contacts and different offices. Centralization of the data, so having one place where all this data is stored in the cloud and all the advantages that come from having it all in one spot instead of different silos and not gathering that corporate knowledge, not being able to store all the information, because that's an asset as well for your organization. So is that information in one place where it can be accessed and leveraged, or is it out in a region, in a folder somewhere, not online, not available, not accessible, and if something happens, you lose that knowledge. So data centralization is another common theme that I always hear as a goal in these projects. Certainly don't want to shortchange consistency in process. So what works? And sometimes it's different from region to region, and I certainly would expect from country to country there are going to be differences in how they do things. But overall, there should be some consistency in process. This will carry through and help your customers learn how to deal with you and interact. Doesn't force them to learn a new process and a new model depending on which country they're in, which region they're dealing with, which sales rep they might have. And it gives a better understanding, especially from a forecasting perspective. If you can get good consistency in your processes and take good processes and develop them and then carry them out to other regions so you can drive, again, those operational efficiencies. That's typically another goal that we talked about, our panel guys up here, a lot about how they were able to achieve that, and they'll share their stories with you as well. And lastly, improve customer service. Everyone understands how hard it is to acquire customers. Everyone understands the cost of losing those customers and how much easier it is to keep your customers happy, how increased customer satisfaction leads to customer loyalty, and in tough economic times like this, that could be the difference between surviving the downturn versus not. Saw some great interesting stuff in an article I was reading about companies during economic downturns, and they looked at several large global companies and how they re-entrenched and recommitted themselves to customer service during economic downturns. And they were always the companies that came out of the downturns first, and they were the ones that grew larger after the downturns, much larger, exponentially larger, because they became committed to customer service when that was of paramount importance. So we probably, hopefully, these goals are resonating with you. They're probably some of the things that you were trying to do or are thinking of doing if you haven't done yet, depending on where you are at in the life cycle of your Salesforce deployment. But there are clearly going to be some challenges. If it was all that easy, everyone would have done it already. You wouldn't need to come to the session and hear some of the things that we've learned and want to share with you. So some of those challenges are, again, those business silos. The data that pops up, and we'll talk in some of these cases with deployments that have gone through dozens of countries where each one had different data systems that needed to be migrated and brought into a central system like Salesforce. And it just wasn't easy. It wasn't impossible, but it's certainly a challenge to bring all these individual data stores together. And in each region, there might be multiple data stores, and what data are we going to want to bring in, and which systems is it worth bringing in, and do I bring it in and then clean it up, or do I clean it up and then bring it in? So lots of different decisions you'll have to make. in terms of the challenges around bringing all that data together from all the various different business silos. And it's not going to be necessarily what everyone's looking for, so you're going to have to deal with some resistance to change. And change management is a big part of that, and how you communicate and message that and the value that you're trying to bring to an organization all has to be part of the messaging that you provide in order to really successfully achieve the type of adoption that will lead to the operational efficiencies and the process consistency that we're trying to achieve in the first place. Internationalization. So how hard is that to provide in an application? And by internationalization, we're typically talking about multi-languages, multiple currencies, and all the things that get wrapped up in that. And fortunately, because I've had the opportunity to work with lots of different systems, this is a fairly straightforward and easy process in Salesforce, easier than I've ever seen it in any other application. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well and what challenges that presents. Global deployments require global deployment strategies. So how are you going to handle training? How are you going to handle administration? Again, centralized or decentralized. How do you get this new application in the hands of the folks that are going to ultimately use it? And how do you make sure they know how to use it well and use it the way that you intended? And get their feedback, and how do you get that mechanism going so that they can tell you what else they need and maybe what didn't work but could be done better. So lots of challenges that I'm sure you guys have experienced and are experiencing as you go through the life cycle of your deployment. Fortunately, if you haven't been doing this for a long time, or if you have but just needed someone to talk to, we've got a great panel here today to talk about their challenges and their experiences in their global deployment. So I'd like you to say hello to Keith Overbay.
Hello.
And Brian Gross.
Hey, guess I better move. So
and I'm going to let them come up and talk about themselves and tell you a little bit about the companies they're with, some of the description of their implementation, and then we'll get into some of the questions and answers I have for them, and then we'll get into your questions as well. Brian? I've been hitting the down arrow.
So I think our little clicker's broken. So when I meet people here at Dreamforce, and really everywhere I go, I find that Tyco Electronics is a well-known name. You know, it's a brand name people recognize, but I don't think that many people really know where it started or where it all came from. So I think the story behind it, an inventor back in the early 1940s was working and with the construction of airplanes to fight in the war, and he saw the difficulty in just soldering wires together and maintaining good connections, and he invented the ring terminal. I know you've all seen it. You crimp it to the end of a wire, you put a screw through it, and tighten it down to make an electrical connection. So that very simple device is where Tyco Electronics technology started, and as electronics moved from simple appliances to computers to today's advanced networking and data centers, Tyco Electronics was always there at that physical electronic connection, enabling and accelerating that advancement, enabling people to manufacture electronics faster, enabling them to have more solid electrical connections. So today we have around 500,000 products, and we're roughly, I think now, $12 billion company. And we provide these electronic components to almost any industry you can imagine. So if you take your smartphone, there's probably 20 of our parts inside it. In your car, there are probably a couple of $100 worth of our cable assemblies and connectors. And we're always right there at that physical electrical connection. Now, our Salesforce organization is in one business unit of Tyco Electronics, and I work in the sales cloud, sales and marketing. We have around 320 users. They're spread all over the globe, and our business unit focuses on networking infrastructure, so for your office networks, your data centers, and a big demand driver in that market is, of course, commercial construction. And this construction is growing most rapidly in the developing markets. So I think one of the interesting things is that only a quarter of our revenue is here in the United States and Canada, and the rest of it is spread throughout the globe. So when we were looking at the challenges that we had to overcome as an organization, it was all around getting visibility into these geographies. Many times there may be a country manager who's all by himself in a particular country or a particular area. Sometimes there's teams of 2 or 3 in specific regions. We needed to gain that global perspective. We needed to share best practices across geographies as far as selling effectiveness. And we turned to Salesforce really to get that single spot that everybody can go to collaborate on our global accounts. We like the integration with the desktop applications, and we had a number of internal systems that we had to work with. And I think that the results, we're still a young organization in Salesforce. We implemented our first users about a year ago, and then proceeded through North American and Latin America first, then Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and then Asia, finally around the March-April timeframe. So we're still young and we're still learning a lot, but I think that probably the perspective I can bring is going from no CRM at all, no common database, and just trying to pull together these different business units.
Thank you. Brian, you might say a few words about Smith.
Hi, I'm Keith Overbay with A.O. Smith, and it's all right. It's been a long week, huh?
Yeah, a little bit.
So A.O. Smith manufactures and sells storage tank-style water heaters, primarily North America, but we also have a market in China. We just launched in India, in Europe. So we employ over 15,000 people. We currently have about 190 user licenses on Salesforce and actively using 150 to 160 of them right now. Unlike the Tyco story, on my end, I'm primarily focused on service and support, so we use a Service Cloud. And we have to operate warranty and technical support call centers for our products. We have millions of water heaters under warranty. They're all big units with a serial number on them and an 800 number printed on the side. So we sell in both the retail and wholesale markets. So you take like the retail market, we're selling at a Lowe's home improvement store. You get a lot of people who have a lot of questions about installing their unit or have problems with their unit down the road and need someone to speak to because they don't have that plumber coming in and managing it all for them. On the wholesale side, it's more driven by the actual service techs and the plumbers who buy and install the products and then manage them for their customers. So our big challenge that we had to address with Salesforce was sort of building out our warranty service and support network and expanding. We wanted to expand our hours and we wanted to expand our staff and find a cost-effective way of doing that. We were when I started with the company back in 2005, I think our operating hours were 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday with some reduced hours on Saturday. We didn't have enough agents on the phone. We didn't really have any good way of expanding our internal call center to meet the growing demand of the customer base where our sales were growing at Lowe's by leaps and bounds, and they were kind of getting away from us. So we decided that we needed to incorporate an external partner to help us with our support organization. So we went to a company called Nova Solutions in India. And they allowed us to kind of do the late night coverage, the weekend coverage, and through some skill-based routing, helped us with some of the call types where the caller didn't necessarily need an expert technician on the phone. They just needed someone to generate an authorization form and exchange their unit or something like that. So the beauty of the Salesforce platform really was that being that it was in the cloud, there wasn't any infrastructure to build in order to bring that call center online. We were able to go train the group, log them in on a web browser, and they were using the same platform that the group in the United States was doing, the exact same job with the exact same call screens and everything. And of course, it allowed us to collect all the data in one big universal database. So, just a couple of brief points about some results that we achieved. Prior to implementing Salesforce, we were using a client-server-based CRM tool, and we were documenting roughly 50% of the calls that would come into our call center. So if we handled 1,000 calls, we had 500 case records in the system. So we really didn't have a lot of visibility into half the calls we were getting for whatever reason. And just through improvements in the way that we documented the calls in Salesforce, we got that up to about 80%. So, now the 20% of calls that we're not getting documented, we're confident that that's probably just some real general stuff. It probably doesn't pertain to a specific serial numbered unit. It's, maybe a general question about where they can get literature or that type of thing. And, the other big advantage was a key to managing the warranty business, obviously, is tracking where your warranty costs are going. We do a lot of parts replacements. I mean, we warranty water heaters for 6 years in the residential market, and those component parts are going to fail. Within a 6-year period, you're going to have to replace some component parts like elements and thermostats and that type of thing. So we were documenting about 70% of the component parts we were replacing with a specific unit serial number. So we knew when it was manufactured and all the details. And we've got that up to about 85% now just through better management of the data within Salesforce.
Thank you. So we're moving on into the questions and answers section here. I've got some questions that I've put together to ask these guys. And we're going to run through some of those and then open it up to you guys. So certainly, I would think we would want to know maybe from their perspective, what was the biggest challenge in a global deployment? What are some of the things that you have to think about and worry about? And so maybe, Brian, you can give us some comment on that.
Yeah, well, I think that probably the hardest thing for us, and again, it goes back to the fact that we're just so diverse geographically, and I think that being able to sell the application and evangelize it, because we weren't moving from another CRM. These guys were operating fairly independently of one another, and they had been successful at that. And they needed to know what work they would no longer have to do once they have the application, where it's going to make them more money, where it's going to make them more efficient. And I think that the challenge, at least initially for us, was we didn't really even know the answers to all of that throughout the world because of the different business processes. And I would say initially we probably could have done a better job at evangelizing that. So you need to make sure that at the manager, the regional level, you tell him the information he's going to have to better manage his area, to make better business decisions, to keep up with the competition. At the rep level, they need to know how having Salesforce is going to help them better respond to a customer when somebody calls them out of the blue, how they're going to find more people to call at accounts they're trying to target, and really get down to that tactical level and show how it's going to make them more efficient.
Sure. That's a consistent theme we hear in a lot of CRM implementations all across Salesforce, that we call it the secret sauce. It's that buy-in at the management level so that they understand the value they're going to get, so that they drive that adoption, because without that data, without the inputs and feedback, there's no value. How about from your perspective, Keith?
Yeah, the biggest thing that we had as far as the global deployment, specifically with training up this call center on the other side of the world, was getting, in Johnson City when we bring people in and train them, they have water heaters in their garages at home, just like the ones that we're taking calls on, and a lot of them have worked on appliances and that type of thing, and it's radically different in India. So the training and getting the information in front of them was key, and obviously with the tool, we employed the documents library to make sure that they had the troubleshooting flow charts and that type of thing, and we did a little HTML announcements page on their home page, so we could keep them up to date on things. it was really just kind of getting the materials in front of them, shipping some products over there so they had them right there where the call center is, so they could actually take a water heater apart, pull elements out of it, that type of thing. Get familiar with, to as much a degree as possible with what it was that they were working with on the phone.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so clearly a little bit different on a service application than a sales application.
Yeah.
Sales application, you have to find some of the carrots and sticks that you might use, whereas in a service organization, if you're not in your app, you're not answering questions.
But I think to that point, though, there are ways of making sure that people have to use the app to do their job. If you route approvals through it, if you figure out a way to get it into the business process, you're much better off. So in places we're able to do that we get significantly higher adoption than in places that it's just an extra, they perceive it as just an extra thing they have to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that leads to, you're going to have all these groups around the world doing different things, responsible for different things. So that generally means you have to come up with an administrative plan. And who's going to be doing the administration, and how do you handle local administration? How do you handle support of those different groups and different geographies and time zones? So maybe briefly, if you can talk to us, Keith, about how you've done that at AO.
I'm the customer quality manager, and I'm kind of the special projects guy, and I'm the guy that when we need to roll out a new process in the call centers, or I do a lot of the reporting and analysis, tracking of data. I do all of the field reliability reporting and that type of thing. And Salesforce has kind of been a part-time thing for me. I'm the administrator for the system, and it's a fraction of my time really. Once the system's there, you don't have to really maintain it because it's being done for you. So as far as resetting passwords, creating new user accounts, that type of thing, I have the ability to set up profiles for a couple of key people in our external call centers to just reset passwords for their users and do simple things like that. I've trained them how to run their own custom reports. So if they want to keep track of the people in their call center and see how many gas control valves they're replacing each week and what units they're replacing them on and what drove them to do the replacement, they run their own custom reports. So there's some flexibility there to have kind of some power users in the external sites, but I primarily serve as administrator.
Great, great. Brian, you have the same type of model?
I think that initially we probably underserved the administration. So I never have been on Salesforce full time. Initially, we didn't have anybody who was, I guess, your full-time administrator. We do have that now, and I think that was a good idea. So she's able to focus on the data, focus on the setup of the different templates and the other administrative things. We do that out of the United States, so we do centralize on that administrative capability. But we do have people who are responsible for understanding the business process differences in the various areas and providing feedback about customizations that they may need based on a different business value. And again, I think that you have to identify when a difference is out of habit and when it's a legitimate business need. So if you just let everybody have it their way all the time, you end up with so many fields in a data structure that's unreportable. So unfortunately, when they say they want something different, you have to get down to the how and the why, and those local people who understand the market there can really help you with that.
So sure. So it sounds like your model's a little bit of a hybrid of centralized and decentralized. How about training, if we can touch on that real quick? Are those same local administrators, the people out in the field that are representing the business at that point, also your training points? Are they the ones for first level support, or maybe how do you address that at Tyco? Or is it the same people?
We had a world tour of training at the very initial implementation,
Okay.
but it wasn't at the rep level, and actually that we might have rethought that. I think that there are a lot of people who this is completely foreign to them, and having somebody walk them through the basic steps is pretty useful. But we do have the self-paced training inside the application. People can go there, and hosted a lot of conference calls. So up at 8 o'clock in the evening, having a conference call with Asia, or holding conference calls and webinars here in the States.
So I assume you just picked up 6 or 7 new languages?
Yeah, of course. You don't?
Rosetta Stone, they have them at the airport. It's great. How about you, Keith? How was that from your perspective? Lots of trips to India or Toronto? Or
No, the initial startup in India, we went, myself and one other person went and spent about a week and a half with the initial startup. But once they had a couple of trainers on their staff, learn the training process. Of course, they had the training deck and all the practice and that type of stuff. From that point on, they just kind of maintain it themselves. Whenever I develop new content or new processes, I typically will just train the supervisors and trainers there via WebEx.
Sure.
And then they go out and train the staff on their own schedule. Of course, we have a call center trainer in our Johnson City, Tennessee office who's responsible for new users coming in there, and that's kind of just maintains itself.
Trainer kind of.
Yeah, it's a train the trainer, exactly. You get some competent trainers in each location, and you don't worry about it.
Excellent, excellent. So we might not even spend that much time on this slide because I think I mentioned earlier, internationalization in Salesforce seems to be pretty easy, or at least it has been for many of the customers I've worked with. But maybe you can talk about any challenges. Have you had any challenges with internationalization? Is it a topic you'd spend a lot of time talking about? Or was it just that easy?
Honestly, the system has not been an issue. We've developed a lot of custom content, and we've done it on the fly in a lot of cases. We will come upon a new challenge. We had a new return authorization process we needed to put in place, where we needed to do a system-generated code that we could give to a customer and allow them to go back to a Lowe's store.
Like an RMA number.
Yeah, exactly. And take their unit back to the Lowe's store with this number, and the Lowe's store would recognize the number and be able to process a return for them and exchange their tank out for them. And I was able to build that in 3 or 4 hours and build some training material and deploy it, and within a week or two, we had a new return authorization process. And you don't need to use the force.com or anything. It's all just creating a custom object and walking through the wizards. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Kind of click the code.
Yeah.
Great.
And I get to look real smart. I don't have to know code. Just
You look
pretend that
mighty
I do.
intelligent. Brian, how about you? So how many countries have you deployed to? How many languages? How many currencies?
I think we use almost
Ballpark.
all of them.
Almost all of them.
I think 13 languages, 20 or 30 some currencies. But again, I probably thought about that for a couple of hours.
Right.
I mean, it's really not a big issue for us.
Okay.
So again, I think that the bigger challenge is that the technology will work its way out. It actually does more than we need it to do. Honestly, and
Good.
so how to remove features is more of a challenge than how to add them.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that does remind me. I guess when we first started, there were objects in there that we wanted people to have view access to, but not write access. There were objects that we wanted them to be able to edit, manipulate, and it took me a while to get good at configuring all of that, because we would have an account record in there for a particular location,
Right.
and all of a sudden it would be gone or its name would be changed. And I had to get better at figuring out, I got to lock this stuff down here. So I probably rushed the deployment and didn't really get all of that buttoned up correctly. So I kind of had to clean a lot of messes up along the way until I got better at locking things down. Because if you leave a way there for somebody to break it, obviously they'll break it.
Was there a light bulb moment? Was there some great help and training article you found, or
I think
was it Salesforce for Dummies book or something?
I just stumbled through it, reading the help files and asking questions. I just kind of stumbled through it and dug through the setup and read the help that I clicked help on the pages and kind of figured it out over time. But it took me a couple of months because I wasn't working with a professional. I kind of had to learn as I go.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. So what kind of impact has this had on handling your accounts globally? Is it giving you a better ability to manage global accounts differently, or has it empowered a different team for you at Tyco?
Yeah, well, I think that here, again, I'll get back to we finally finished getting everybody on the system, just 6-7 months ago. So we're still trying to figure out what the strategy will be on that, but now it's possible. So much more possible than before. And I think that the country managers initially, in some countries, didn't want to let people in the neighboring country see their accounts, and
fear over
I'm not sure that there's lots of different concerns, but I think probably the light bulb was when we had enough calls and enough discussion on it that everybody agreed that we would have global read-only access on accounts, and now we do have some plans in place to match people at accounts with people and partners in areas and coordinate global calling activity and things like that. So,
absolutely. Yeah. So more of a team mentality. Great, great. So Keith, talked about some of the things that you struggled through but found your way. What kind of operational efficiencies? I know you even mentioned some of the statistics before. Around some of your part tracking and things like that. But what's the impact of that? What does it mean to your organization to go from tracking 70% of those cases to now 85% of those? And what decisions does that help you make that you couldn't make before?
We get more of a micro look at, when I started with the company, we would say we knew that we were replacing too many electronic control boards on units, on some of our high-end units. And we knew that it was being generated by the call center. We knew that the call center was getting calls on products that weren't operating, and they were jumping to replacing the control board because they really didn't know what the real problem, the root cause was. It could have been a power supply issue or anything. So by being able to track a higher percentage of those and being able to run the custom reports and that type of thing, you're able to zero in on specific CSRs within your organization that have a higher replacement rate based upon the number of calls they're getting, and really dig into their cases and
so it's almost like
attack it at a micro level, which is much more effective than just blasting out to the whole group. Quit replacing so many control boards. That's not very effective in really hitting the root cause of the problem.
So it's a training identification opportunity as well, and a management opportunity within the call center.
We obviously don't want to pay a lot of money out for people to go out and repair water heaters that have been installed incorrectly. Right. Somebody goes and buys it at Lowe's and takes it home and installs it themselves and don't get it right, and they call us and say it doesn't work. We don't want to send a technician out there to give them a free install.
Right.
We want to be able to talk them through it or give them some material to help them fix wherever they went wrong. So.
But will you send somebody out? Because I need to replace my anyway, we'll talk after.
We'll do whatever we can to help.
We'll talk after. Appreciate that. Customer first, customer centric. Yeah. So enough of me. I've been up here standing and asking my questions. I'm hoping you guys came with some questions or have some ideas, or this conversation we've had maybe was thought-provoking enough to bring out some questions that you might have. I could either come around with a microphone or you can step up to the center, but I'd like to get it on the microphone or it won't wind up getting recorded, and you'll lose your opportunity for your 15 minutes of fame. So who is going to be first? Does anyone have any questions at all? Yes. Yes, I'll come bring it to you. Thank you.
Around internationalization, I know that we glanced over it because of the simplicity of accomplishing it. But there's a complexity in my mind, and I'm wondering if you could help us with that. We have a global rollout of both the Service and Sales Cloud. For our internal-facing users, we have decided to keep everything in English. But we have also implemented the customer portal for some of our customers to be able to log cases in. But because we have some customers who have a preference to use to use their local language, we want to be able to roll that out specific to the language that would be a preferred language for a particular customer. We know that it's kind of simple to simply change the language on the UI. But what about the data, the underlying data? What are the best practices around? Do we need to be converting or translating the data as well? An example would be the pick list values. So what are some of the best practices? And again, that's a question for all of you. I don't know if that's the extent that you may have taken your internationalization efforts, or from a Salesforce perspective.
Sure. So I can say from a Salesforce perspective, the internationalization and the translation of fields and things on the portal is almost identical, or is identical to how you do it within the application itself. So even if we haven't deployed the portal, as long as you've deployed multiple languages, which generally, so out of the box, when you just get a brand new fresh install of Salesforce, it is already available in multiple languages. And so the things that we typically talk about needing to translate are custom fields and custom objects and things that you build out beyond the standard fields which we already provide translation for. And for that, there's a translation workbench in the application that lets you do field labels and pick list values. And the data itself, like a text field or something, is a little bit different. Those are stored in whatever language they're entering into the database. And that's a little bit of a different discussion. But I think for you it was around pick list values. So have either of you guys used the translation workbench, I would assume?
Yeah, so definitely on the pick list values, you have a translation workbench. You can assign somebody who is responsible for a certain language, and I'd recommend getting them to do all or most of the work before you turn it on. As I don't know, like a carrot to actually get it, they have to translate it or something, because it's harder to get people to go in there and translate after the fact.
So it was somebody local within the region you were deploying to that you gave that responsibility to?
Right. And again, I think I'm interested on the text fields, how you might handle that, because you don't have the ability to use the translation workbench on the text fields, I don't believe.
Right. So that's usually a corporate decision around how you choose to store your data. When we talk about internationalization, it's usually the fields, the field labels, the pick lists, the help. All of those get automatically translated into the end user's locale, depending on the locale they set their preference to in their profile.
Thank you. And if I ask a follow-up question, so
Please.
Assuming that, let's say, the translation is done for pick list values, but then wouldn't that be hampering your data mining efforts? Let's say if for the same, if you're trying to run reports on, let's say, particular values, if the same values represented in multiple languages, wouldn't there be multiple instances or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So does the workbench tie it all back together into a single
So
record?
that's the case. With pick list values, the application's doing that for you, irregardless of what language they choose and what language you present to them. It knows, value A is English, and it's the same in German, and it's the same in French, and the same in Italian. So depending on what your locale is, that's how you'll see the data represented.
So then hopefully the underlying data is language agnostic then?
Yes, and the reports and dashboards will consider A in American the same as A in German and total them up that way and filter that way as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a Dwight right behind you. He'll take that microphone. Any other questions? Anything that you guys wanted to ask? Yes, please. Gentleman right in the front here.
I have a question. How do you manage to get the feedback from the field, knowing that as an international company you have users in many countries, and especially how do you get them to, how you manage to take into account this feedback?
So I did two things. One is we implemented the Ideas tab. So if people have something they want to change about the application or a process they want to add, they can put it in the Ideas area. We probably don't get enough traffic in there for the voting to really play out, so it's really, I go and read it and decide what to do. That's a place to store it. We also, I try to have monthly calls with the people in each area. So actually I have a biweekly call, but one call's for the time zones and around North and South America, and then I have another call once a month for the time zones in Asia Pacific and India and that type of thing.
So again, you get it, that you've exposed the ideas portal to them, so they're able to promote stuff that way, but you're not getting enough activity on it to use the voting to bubble the best ideas to the top.
I guess
you're
maybe
just reading
we're
through.
still going to just decide on the business interest.
Okay. And then calls.
It's more of a dictatorship than a democracy. Is that what you're saying?
To some degree, yes.
Do regional calls
We try to
pose,
take it into account, yeah.
I'm sorry. Do regional calls pose a challenge with a language barrier, or how? Or
well,
is everyone
most of,
kind of you want to talk to Brian, learn English?
It's a challenge. It's more of a challenge in some areas than others, but I try to get an English speaker on the phone.
Okay. Probably best practice, right?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to get very far
Keith,
without that.
any challenges along those lines? Or?
I'm embarrassed to say I haven't been using the ideas portal, but I'm sure I need to be. We've been much more low tech. I'll get an email from someone at one of the call centers, or as I'm walking through the local one, I'll have somebody stop me and say, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing this?" So I probably need to formalize it. So one of the advantages of coming to Dreamforce. Right?
Do the emails come directly to you, or have you at least created an email alias that everyone can send enhancement
now
requests
you're just piling
to?
on, aren't you?
Kick him while he's down.
We implemented the case system internally as well. So I took all of the users and I made them contacts, and then under an account of Tyco Electronic Salesforce users. And so now that they're contacts, they can submit cases, and then the cases get routed internally based on.
They submit those on the web. You've exposed the
through
self-service portal.
No, they're just
right
in
on Salesforce.
Yeah.
So
there's a link on our home page, and it takes them directly to create a new case, and they'll choose data import or whatever they're
record
looking
type
at,
that you use for that for enhancement
or
requests
if
or
it's
feedback.
a marketing collateral request, we can route that to marketing type of thing.
Did that help a little bit and answer your question, or was there more beyond that? So you've got ideas, you've got cases that you can use. I've heard of that a lot. Sometimes it's just as informal as email traffic. And if you want to get a little more process around that, you can create an email-specific alias for enhancement requests, something that you throw in and filter and view. The only thing I would add to that, and I'm not sure.
Chatter.
Is chatter, of course. We're all going to be chattering about this later.
Yeah.
And that'll bring a whole new perspective to product enhancement requests with real time. But chatter is great. To the last point I was going to make around making sure whatever vehicle you use for taking in that input, you close the loop and provide return communication. So ideas is great for that because you can post an idea as delivered or done. Cases are great for that. When you close out a case, you can create a workflow rule that sends to the case requester the decision, yay or nay. And sometimes not everyone's expecting you to do everything that they ask, but at least respond so that it doesn't become the black hole of requests, and then people will just stop making requests. It's always great to get that feedback from your community, and anything you could do to foster that and promote that is usually a good thing. Any other questions? Anything anyone had about their management or their administration of the application, centralized or decentralized training programs, some best practice you want to share with everyone?
Hello. I'm curious to know, within the different countries that you've deployed in, was there a difference in needs? Did all the users want the same features and functions within the Salesforce setup, or do you have different setups for the different countries or regions?
One example I have of that is I told you, we launched last year in the Indian market with our product, and we needed to put a customer service group in place specifically for that market, obviously, that could speak the language and that type of thing. So the same partner we're using to support our North American call center, we went to them and had them establish an extra group of 10 agents that were dedicated to the Indian market. And I created custom profiles for those users and custom page layouts for the case, the asset, the account, the contact, with fields that were specific to the types of things that they were tracking, with products that were specific to what they were selling there, and just through profiles built kind of their own little microcosm within Salesforce that they operate under. So when they log in and generate a new case, they have a completely different layout. When they create a new asset record, it's got different fields that, the color of the cover on the unit is a thing that you can change there, because their units will be visible in a bathroom or something,
How about on your side,
I think
Brian?
that for us, we initially, I guess, thought that things would be a lot more different than they even needed to be. So we initially had multiple record types for accounts, I believe. But then, a couple months in, I was like, what's the business reason or business process behind this? It's just complicating things. And we actually went back to a single record type. Just because it does seem as though our selling stages and don't really change from geography to geography. Now, where we have had to add things is certain fields are required in some places that aren't in others. So if in Europe they integrate with SAP, or they want to store an SAP and we don't use SAP in the States, we'll add an SAP field for them to use or something like that.
So interesting, and I've heard other customers share the same kind of experience. Went into the process thinking, just because we're deploying a single system doesn't mean everyone's going to want to do the same thing or capture the same data or have the same process. And Salesforce is great at that. You can have record types and page layouts, and they can combine with the profile and display a different UI to different groups and different users. And a lot of customers will spend a lot of time trying to figure out what those exact requirements are for each individual region. And there's a lot of good side to that. It gets them engaged. It gets them involved. It's an opportunity to learn more about the processes and the business in that region and how they work and how they do it. But I consistently hear that same theme that you echoed, which is then after we deployed all of these different styles and different data points and different page layouts, we found that we were able to kind of, over time, bring them all together, because essentially they all really do the same thing. And yes, there may be a field for an SAP ID for their ERP system, which might be different. Could be a bond system in another country and an Oracle system in another country. And there's certainly always going to be particular needs depending on what data points they're integrating to. But that's where sometimes you find you get a lot of that value by achieving process consistency. So it doesn't mean everyone's going to have the same exact 7 stages on their opportunities, but chances are over time you'll find that the best ones will bubble up and you'll want to deploy them across, and you'll start to bring that back in and consolidate it further.
So the challenge, again, I just emphasize, you get back to, if somebody wants it different, figure out the business reason, and the business reason is going to boil down to either close more deals, close deals faster, or make deals more profitable. If they can't link it back to that, I kind of push back on them for a while. And a lot of times it's just, well, this is just what we like to call things. Well, we all learn other languages and other ways of referring to things all the time, so maybe we can be a little bit more standardized just for the sake of making the system usable.
So have a reason. Just ask deeper questions and make sure for the differences you're going to create, you understand why, and that there's a real reason and a value for that. We've probably got time for another question or two, depending on how quick I can wrap this up. The questions are usually what everyone's looking forward to, so I want to leave as much time for that as possible. So are there any other questions? Does anyone have something they'd like to ask the panel or comment on that we've discussed today? Yes. 1 second for the microphone so we can capture these pearls of wisdom.
Do you guys have any experience bringing Salesforce to a new acquisition other than a new location? Like all the branches that you guys deployed to, were they currently members of your company, or have you ever had an experience where, you know, you kind of buy somebody and bring them onto your system?
I'm getting ready to have that experience over the next 4 or 5 months. But it's kind of the opposite way. I was part of American Water Heater, and we were acquired by A.O. Smith a couple of years ago. And we're getting ready to remove the client server system that they have and replace it with Salesforce. So we're kind of going the other direction with it. But we're kind of diving into that right now and mapping processes, and we're mapping how they run their processes, how we run ours. We're going to do a combined map of how we want to do things, universally. And then the big thing is going to be data migration and basically redeploying the system. Instead of just sort of integrating them in, I'm going to do a redeployment with some new things added that we want to do going forward, and get everyone going in a new direction all at once. Which it's a good opportunity for that when you bring another group in, because there's always things when you implement 3 or 4 months later you wish you would have done them differently. So we found that, of course.
I haven't had experience with that, but you never know. Things change all the time.
We're all under NDA here. You can share. No. So, yeah, those are your typical challenges, right, when you're bringing in another organization. What system are they using? Are we going to get on to one org? Is it 2 orgs? Do they already have Salesforce? How do we bring 2 Salesforce orgs together? And that's gotten interesting over the last few years, whether or not you need to do an org merge or an org migration, multiple systems coming together, or leveraging some of our new functionality like Salesforce to Salesforce. So hopefully that gave you some more information. There are actually a bunch of sessions that you can look for on org merges and data migrations that will help with some of the typical challenges that come up when you try to bring 2 companies together, or 2 new business units, or, as you guys did, move upstream into the mothership and kind of become their standard for CRM as well. Any other questions? We probably can squeeze. Okay, good, because it would have been a squeeze. So session wrap-up and lessons learned. We talk a lot about achieving those operational efficiencies, and I think even more about today, a lot of the topic and discussion felt like it was around all the challenges of having a global environment and the multiple languages, and not necessarily in the application, but from an administration, from a training, from an ongoing communications perspective. Those are all things that are common themes throughout these kinds of deployments. Forethought, planning, understanding, having support in the local regions, having people that can do those translations for you, both in the application as well as on the regular calls and the follow-up, the requirements gathering. Those are going to be really important, that you're able to communicate efficiently and effectively. So I'd like you all to say thank you, and I will say thank you to you guys. I appreciate all the time you've invested in helping prepare for this and coming up in here and sharing your experiences, bearing your soul, as it were, talking about your faults. I know it's hard, but we all appreciate and benefit from that. So I do appreciate that, and I hope you all appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
That's for you guys, not for me. I'll step out of the way. Great. So I don't know if you had a chance to catch the other manufacturing session that went on yesterday, but there is another manufacturing track session today called The Secrets for Business Brand Loyalty with Cloud Computing. I've seen this cloud theme. I guess, that's something that we're going to carry through into the vertical sessions as well. And that'll be in the North 124 room, so in the same exact room at 11:30 this afternoon. I hope you're able to stick around and attend that session as well. Completed online survey and enter to win. So we are giving away these cool little gadgets and iTouches, and that looks like the latest iPod Nano. So please fill out the surveys. We really do want your feedback, need your feedback to continue to refine this process and always drive improvements to these sessions. So please fill out your survey. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys coming here today. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you for coming to Dreamforce. Get home safe, and happy coding cloud computing.